Hello everyone. This is part 1 of a two-part series on Metro 2033. I split it up into two for your convenience, but may have a full review up in the end as well, without any of the intros. Either way, enjoy. Metro 2033 is a game based on a 2002 book of the same name, developed by 4A Games and launched recently. Wait a minute. 2010? Does this mean we're finally done talking about new games in this godforsaken channel? No, no, of course not. But I needed a quick distraction until Doom releases, so here you go. This game ruined my life! A lot happened in 2013. The PS4 launched alongside whatever this is, GTA 5 and The Last of Us hit the shelves, and US President Donald Trump finally let the intrusive thoughts take over. The few survivors of this, shall we call it, oopsie, happened to be in the Metro system when it all went off, and were forced to effectively recreate human civilization, foraging on an assortment of mushrooms, dogs with big snouts, and dogs with even bigger snouts. They were able to create a full-scale economy based on trading with the few goods they had access to down there, using the only currency that would make sense under the circumstances: cold, hard lead. Come on, you are just inviting inflation at that point. Did you not learn anything from us? Long story short, the people of the Metro succeeded in their task of creating a stable society where everyone, Nazis, communists, capitalists, and centrists alike, lived together in peace. The end. So a war broke off, and then another war, and a few more for good measure, as well as a full-blown nuclear attack to top it all off. Take that, immigrants. The first thing you may think of is, this is just Fallout in Russia, and you would be wrong actually. Because for one, you don't play as a side character in the story of someone far more important than you. And also, the proverbial vault is actually more inviting than the outside. The events of Stalker 4 Shadow of Gu-Noble take place in the damp, cold, dirty boots of Artyom, a 20-year-old who for some reason looked like this 20 years ago. They grow up so quickly. Seriously though, I'm glad they at least retconned Artyom's age in Exodus, because it makes no sense whatsoever in the original game. Artyom's home station, exhibition, or VDNKh for short, is under attack by a mysterious species known as the Dark Ones. Nightmarish in appearance, the Dark Ones are able to take down whole squads of men without the latter ever firing a shot, simply through the monumental amounts of brainrot they induce on their victims. Absolutely despicable. A member of the Order of Gigachads, Hunter, friend of Artyom's adoptive dad, goes to track them and gives Artyom the task of going to Polis, the capital of the Metro, in order to get in contact with the Order and tell them what happened in case he doesn't return. Leaving his dog tags behind, Hunter disappears into the darkness in slow motion. The journey of Artyom begins the next day, when he takes a caravan of humanitarian aid headed for Riga, a neighboring station, under the false pretense that he is acting as a guard, but in reality not intending to return anytime soon. Before we do that though, we need to get ourselves introduced to the greatest enemy of God's creation: metal pipes and duct tape, awkwardly put together into something resembling a gun, I think. Metro 2033 offers a wide variety of weapons, from the aforementioned glorified slingshot to genuine military equipment, as well as war crimes. Ah yes, just like the dear leader likes it. An interesting addition are the pneumatic rifles, which are stealthy, semi-automatic and surprisingly powerful, but need to be pumped to keep their strength up. Almost all of these instruments are upgradable with extended mags, chokers, holographic sights, silencers and night vision. To top it all off, you can carry up to 4 kinds of throwables, from knives to explosives, as well as 3 different guns at once. So you might be wondering, with enough theoretical firepower to kill God, how does this game keep its weapons balanced? It doesn't. At first you are restricted to the basic guns you can find and are drip-fed ammo like a little baby bird, but once you go through some of the optional exploration zones and gain access to the silenced pistol with night vision, it's pretty much over. Supposedly, the silencer increases damage drop-off, but that doesn't stop this little bastard from being a one-hit kill hit-scan sniper rifle, with abundant ammo and no need to massage it every 10 seconds. The other 2 slots are reserved for Gary and Kyle, one of which is an AK with extended mags and hollow sight and the other a semi-automatic shotgun with extended barrel. If you're wondering why I gave 2 inanimate objects proper names, it's because I found no reason to ever exchange them, but only add enough tactical attachments to make the average Floridian cream their cargo shorts. In theory, you should be swapping weapons often depending on the kind of ammo you find on the field, but the reality is that if you have the slightest amount of situational awareness and have better aim than the average 95-year-old, you will never have an ammo problem. By the end I was practically swimming in it in fact, with over 600 military-grade bullets, 3 of which are usually enough to kill a watchman. Not that you'd need this ammo anyway because of the fully automatic chain shotgun you'd be wielding by then, but the fact that even with that hog I wasn't having an ammo problem says it all. You see, this is supposed to be a survival game, where none of your resources should be taken for granted. Abundance should be the furthest thing from a player's grasp, and yet it accompanies you for most of the game. You might say that ammo security is a reward for the exploring players, but they went too far with this one. Players who scavenge should be rewarded, but the size of their reward should not be enough that it takes away the tension from otherwise terrifying encounters. Keep in mind that I initially directed this criticism towards the standard difficulties, which allow you to keep 3 weapons and have very high ammo caps for each one. The Ranger modes, on the other hand, which came out after the game's initial launch, only allow you to have 2 guns at a time, and the ammo cap for each one of them is halved. So in theory, the ammo problem should be fixed, right? No, because the Ranger difficulties also significantly decrease enemy health, meaning you need less ammo in the first place. So the ammo problem still persisted, even though I was taking the same exact routes as I did before. The only extra thing I needed to do is switch weapon types more often, which prevented me from having Gary or Kyle this time around. So all in all, the biggest difference the Ranger modes made was the complete lack of a HUD, which forced me to spam E in every corridor just in case there was some hidden loot. The problem of ammo could be solved by some kind of dynamic reward system, where the game calculates the value of each ammo pickup depending on how much you already have. This would keep the atmosphere much more intact, while not allowing the players who engage with the world to feel like they got nothing for their efforts. I'm not pretending this situation would be easy to implement, or that it would be perfect in every way, but you should not be allowed to turn a thematically important horror segment into another shooting gallery, just because you feel like it. While you're in the armory, you also receive a hand-powered battery charger, which is going to be vital for your flashlight, and a gas mask, the use of which we'll be talking about later. The staple of the Metro series is the physicalizing of, well, everything. The time left on your filters is represented in your wristwatch. Your visibility is measured by a suspiciously binary LED, and your battery charge is represented by a needle in your charger, as well as an audio cue when it's about to run out. Your objectives are marked in a physical notepad, and so is your target direction. For most people, these will be nice touches, but for those playing in Ranger mode, these pieces of information are absolutely necessary. Since you have no timer on your HUD, you need to rely on your watch to see how much time you have to fuck around. No ammo counter means that you have to rely on your journal, and since the Holy Spirit doesn't tell you how much battery you have, you're off to check with your charger. This constant flow of interaction with objects not only brings about more immersion, but it presents an interesting balancing act, where you have to pick the right moment to check your inventory or swap your filters, lest you be punished for it. For this reason alone, I recommend you try out the Ranger Hardcore mode, but only if you already beat the game recently, since QuickTime events are not marked on your screen at all, resulting in you thinking it was a cutscene when in fact the game expected an input. Since I embarrassingly failed a few times even though I replayed the game back to back to do research for this video. Just play the next part, okay? So, if you remember, we last saw Artyom getting ready to leave his home station for Riga. There is not much else we can do here except interrupt some copulation and say goodbye to our stepdad. The final conversation with Sukhoi is especially touching if you read the book, because it recounts in detail how Sukhoi was able to rescue Artyom, and only him, from a dreadful rat infestation befalling Artyom's former station. Sukhoi is portrayed as overprotective, never taking his adopted son on any of his ventures outside of the station, but always sharing stories once he returned. Artyom, on the other hand, is a dreamer. He longs for the outside and cannot bear the weight of being constrained to the same place for years, which is nicely portrayed by his extensive collection of pictures of the old world landmarks as well as books, including a very special one. I'm sure this joke will never get old, by the way. So you can imagine why Artyom would be so eager to take on a potentially lethal task given by someone he barely knows. This is the first and last time you get to interact with Sukhoi in the entire trilogy, and it's completely optional. You can just walk past his room and leave. If you are a monster who doesn't deserve the light of heaven, the way to Riga turns out to be blocked, and the crew reluctantly accepts to take an alternative tunnel, where they are psychically attacked by the Dark Ones. Artyom, being the only one who remains relatively unaffected for some reason, manages to wake his mates up in time to fend off an Ozalis attack. After a two-sided bloodbath, they finally make it to the station. And since we are here, we might as well talk about the pinnacle of the Metro games, the stations. As you probably already guessed by my terrible intro, the Metro games are dark, both narratively and literally. Everything is out to kill you. The living, the not so dead, the environment, even the air wants a piece. The few exceptions to this constant assault are the stations, which are centers of life and trade, bustling with activity unless they aren't. These are the few areas where you aren't allowed a gun either, focusing instead on a more calm kind of exploration. Listening to stories and observing the terrifying children's drawings. Kids nowadays, am I right? I'm sure it's just a phase. You even get some catharsis from time to time.
You never even held a gun.
You can appropriate some money here and there and use it to buy some ammo, weapon attachments, filters, and so on. You can even use it for... Oh, hello.
Now, close your eyes.
You are lured in with this false sense of security when all of a sudden something like this happens. And you get no mercy either. You lose every last penny you had until you made it here. And to add insult to injury, you get made fun of as well.
Dumbass! Everyone knows not to go with Nikki. Raz really packs a punch, no?
If you fell for it, like I did, for research purposes of course, you will never forget this incident. And even though it's a trick the game pulls only once in a specific way, it does a good job at driving home the point. The Metro is not safe. Even outside of the proverbial jungle, in the warm and inviting stations, life is tough and never to be taken for granted. Often you come across stations which are fighting for their continued existence, and ones that already lost, which makes you appreciate the few relatively stable ones even more. Speaking of stable, this is Bourbon. He's a smuggler who learned about the cruise incident and Artyom's uncanny ability to resist psychic influence. Anticipating some use for these abilities, he offers the two travel together, and since Riga is in lockdown, Artyom reluctantly agrees. Or at least I assume he does. He is not really the talkative type in this one. Bourbon is pragmatic. He doesn't concern himself with philosophy or abstract thinking or any of that soy shit. He deals with cold, hard facts, like a true gigachad. And like a true gigachad, he ends up with a lung full of iron. Before that though, he teaches you about the stealth mechanics, like the quote-unquote alarm systems, the fact that glass makes noise, and tripwires, which always catch me about 3 to 4 times per playthrough at minimum, because of how well placed they are. I would say I hate traps in this game, but that would be redundant, because that's the point. You hate the traps, so you stay on your toes for the entirety of the game, especially in darker sections. In fact, they are pretty much the only reason why I've never felt like I've conquered this game, despite playing so much of it. There is nothing quite like hearing a string break and barely realize what happened before... So, after going through these basics, you are put up against your first stealth section, or if you didn't grab the pneumatic gun before this part, your first test of sanity. A group of bandits have ambushed a caravan and are sharing the spoils. Unfortunately, they are in your way. Encounters like this are frequent in the game. You are typically put up against a few roomfuls of enemies, and the game gives you a choice in how to approach the situation. Generally, there are 3 options. Sneak past, clean up the camp stealthily, or die. Basically, you just don't want to be spotted. The enemies are lethal in close quarters, and unless you plan your approach, you risk getting caught in an unwinnable situation, which combined with no regenerating health can rapidly spell doom for you. Not to mention that the bullets are, at least in theory, pretty scarce, so a single ball bearing will be much more efficient than a dozen assault rifle rounds. Combine all of this with the mechanics of a brightness meter and the ability to turn off light sources at will, as well as the inherently dark setting of the game, and you have a lot of incentive to use stealth when possible, with the all-out guns blazing approach typically being a sort of last resort. Even when you do decide to go in all pacifist though, a silenced weapon never hurts, as you can turn off light sources from a distance, potentially alerting your enemies that something is wrong, which doesn't happen when you turn it off by hand. This creates an interesting risk-reward dynamic, when you can risk more in order to remain completely undetected or potentially arouse enemy suspicion while still remaining unseen. On the other hand, this can be turned against your enemies as well, by intentionally shooting a light to lure them into a dark corner when you can take them down. Speaking of takedowns, there are two types of them, a lethal and a non-lethal one. This is typical of stealth games, though there is no practical difference in choosing either one. In other games like Metal Gear Solid 5, enemies left alive will eventually wake up, potentially alerting the camp to your presence. Such a mechanic doesn't exist here, unfortunately, and the only reason someone would choose one way of takedown over the other would be if they already knew that it affects the ending, or to roleplay as a more book-accurate version of Artyom, I suppose. However, I would like this meta-reasoning to be at least supplemented by something more meaty by the game itself. Pacifist players are subject to a different type of challenge. They are expected to explore in the dark, or in the green, to find the most unguarded way to their destination. This usually amounts to looking around a bit until you find the path that is obviously just there for you, conveniently unguarded and unlit, which does make the game feel slightly artificial to some extent, but also means that subsequent playthroughs can look very different to one another. But on the other hand, it means that you won't have access to the ammo and resources that you would have otherwise looted had you taken down most of the enemies. Unlike the aforementioned lethal versus non-lethal takedown, this actually creates an interesting dilemma. You can do what amounts to skipping the level, but you would also skip a lot of the rewards for beating it in a more traditional way. Oh, and by the way, the crouching button is tied to the holding down the control key as opposed to just pressing it, which can make controlling Artyom a bit awkward when you are doing something else with your keyboard hand. The pacifist route is made much more difficult thanks to the tight placement of enemies in later levels, as well as their superhuman senses, which at times go way too far for the challenge of stealth to be enjoyable. You'd expect to be far harder to detect in the middle of a storm, but somehow the enemies know exactly where you are if you shoot their spotlight from 200 meters away. Add to this the seemingly pathological obsession enemies have to target you, and you can be put in a position where in the moment you fire a shot, both monsters and people will stop their squabbles immediately to compete who will one-shot you first.
What I do?
My point about superhuman senses is much clearer here, because this group of enemies seemingly activates aimbot the moment they hear a throwing knife, even though, as I said, we're in the middle of a storm here. After I gave up on my quiet approach for that part, I found out that my gun would wobble periodically due to the strong winds, an effect that didn't seem to affect my enemies, who could easily snipe me from substantial distances anyway. You may say that these are small issues, but they're amplified tenfold in the Ranger hardcore mode, where a singular lapse in fairness can set you back a few minutes at a time. If you like the killing to be stealthier though, the game easily accommodates. A bit too easily for my taste, I have to say. As I mentioned before, the silenced pistol is an absolute god tier weapon in any distance and against any human enemy. No matter how much armor they have, one good shot with this and they are done. Pneumatic weapons like the Helsing and the Tikhar simply cannot compete. They are less accurate, have scarcer ammo and need to pump up every few hits, disadvantages which neither a silenced pistol or AK has. This not only makes the pneumatic weapons pretty much useless until you get to Exodus, but makes a stealthy and deadly approach by far the most dynamic one. It's almost as if this game is trying to make killing people more appealing on purpose. I wonder why. Either way, after a little bit of pest control, the duo finally make it to the market, a center of trade controlled by the Hansa, also known as the Commonwealth of the Ring Line. They're a trading federation comprised of stations that, due to their favorable position in the metro, quickly became rich and powerful first through trade, then through war, and later through trade war. Sound familiar? After a long conflict against the local communist faction, they were able to establish the Hansa Ring, which gave them quick access to trade with the entire metro, de facto making them the most powerful faction. As it turns out, Bourbon owes more money than he could ever pay to the Hansa guards, so the duo quickly prepares to go through the station as fast as possible, to avoid the return of Bourbon's enemies. After some quick thinking, he is able to make some unspecified arrangements with the local guards and they are able to escape to the surface in the nick of time, which conveniently transitions us into another staple of the series, the outside. In the Metro games, the outside has always been treated in an interesting way, because in theory it should be the most desirable place to be in, seeing as that's where most of us live. In reality though, you're probably safer in the tunnels, with a bandit breathing down your neck than you are in the bones of Moscow, where even the air is deadly. Every time you're here, you're required to have a gas mask on and a few spare filters, which means that as long as you are out there, you're constantly under a timer. Not only that, but every blunt hit you take damages the mask, therefore eventually killing you, unless you manage to find a replacement in time. This makes outside exploration very tense and even impossible if you didn't take enough filters with you. You can even reach a point where you aren't anywhere near the end of the level with no filters left, and the game is happy to soft lock you there, unable to make any progress unless you reset the whole game and learn the lesson for the next time. Realistically though, this is mostly just a theoretical threat. Most areas are full of spare filters, and if push comes to shove, you can just exploit the air system entirely by repeatedly taking your mask on and off. So really, the only threat that the lack of air presents is your inability to properly explore the level. Which is a shame, you know, because there is a whole lot of good loot here. The devils are a very deliberate enemy. Incredibly tough to kill, their attacks consist of sweeping you and taking you for a ride, which potentially results in a one-hit kill sometimes. The thing is that you have to watch this stupid ass animation every single time, and when you already know that you aren't surviving the fall, that's just cruel. The devils aren't necessarily a fun enemy to fight, but as a plot device they are genius, because they add to the feeling of the outside world being terrifying in a very creative way. They can attack you only when you are under open sky, so the game is effectively telling you to behave like someone who hasn't touched grass in 15 years. And this is nice, you know. I feel really seen by this game. After a bit of a tumble with the local wildlife, by which I mean reminding them who stands at the top of the food chain, we finally make it to Dry Station, where Bourbon is finally captured by the bandits who he, unsurprisingly, has history with. After finally getting to him, he has a little glitch which allows him to get what's coming. And right after, a mysterious man appears from the shaft. This is Khan, and he's the reason why you found some bandits impaled to the wall while sneaking around the station. He leads you through one of the most interesting aspects of the game, Ghost Tunnel.